Now, earlier this week, Labour MP Rupert Huck was suspended from the party after calling Kwasi Kwarteng superficially black. Yesterday, the Chancellor was forced to tell the Daily Mirror that that isn't me, after the publication used a picture of another man to illustrate a story about him. So does the progressive left have a racism problem? With me now to discuss this is former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, and political commentator Dominique Samuels. I'm going to start with you, Dominique, because I know you've experienced, as have I, a lot of racism online. Where does it mostly come from?
As you can probably guess, it's mostly come from the left. And what is quite pernicious about the way the left express their racism is that they express their racism almost, benevolently, that, they care for you. They just want to know why you don't back your tribe, why you're betraying black people, why you're acting like a white person, without themselves realising that those assumptions are race-based, they're race-based assumptions. And often it's this bigotry of low expectations, the expectation that if you're black, you must stay in your place. And we've seen that play out in the media with the left-wing media's treatment of people like Kwasi Kwarteng and most notably also Priti Patel as well.
What does that mean? You're acting like a white person?
I've had to deal with it so many times. They interpret acting like a white person as perhaps speaking properly, being well informed, acting a certain way. These people don't even realise that they are subconsciously only attributing sort of positive behavioural characteristics to this idea of being white. And if a non-white person, or particularly a black person, deviates from this expectation of what a black person should act like, all of a sudden they're not, really black, or they're betraying their tribe. But that is, of course, how the left operates. The left operates by allocating certain groups these protected characteristic sort of camps that they stay into. And if they step outside of their box, they're the enemy, essentially.
OK, Peter, I don't want to ask you to speak on behalf of the left, but I'll make it more specific to yourself. Do you think that black people can be right-wing?
Of course, black people can be right-wing or left-wing, just like white people could be left-wing or right-wing. I think, first we've just got to acknowledge what Rupert Huck said this week was wrong, and Keir Starmer said the day after that it was wrong. I'm really wary of these kind of massive generalisations like, does the progressive left have a racism problem? There are elements, sadly, of racism in every element of society. It's a bit in education, in the media, in the British left, and in the right. And we know that Labour had a very pronounced problem regarding the Jewish community under Jeremy Corbyn. I think Keir Starmer's made great progress in that. And I know that Baroness Saida Vazi has spoken out about her experience of Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. But just as I think most people join the Conservative Party because they're patriotic and want to help the country, most people join the Labour Party for similar reasons. And sadly, there are pockets of really disgusting bigotry in every part of society. I think we should be open about that, but also try and be nuanced in the language we use.
Yeah, I mean, it is a generalisation, but it comes from somewhere. This idea that people, when we talk about racism, we often go straight to the far right, as in the old-fashioned racists who, I just don't like you because of the colour of your skin. But this is important to address because many people don't recognise this racism, this patronising racism, that if you're, like Dominique said, if you're portraying positive signs of, speaking properly, or if you're successful, or if you walk in a certain way, it's seen as a form of whiteness. So the left somehow, quite often, attribute positive traits as white and negative traits as black. And when someone like Kwasi Kwarteng is speaking properly, he's only superficially black. And the only reason I pointed out from the left is because we're quite often quick to point out racism from the right, but it's not necessarily seen from the left. Do you recognise that there is this undercurrent of condescension, that people should be belonging to certain tribes and should stick to their tribes?
Well, you say an undercurrent. Clearly, what you described has happened in all parts of society. I don't think the left is more condescending than the right. I think there's been.
Well, let's take it back to lived experiences then, because the left often talk about lived experience. And if I say my personal lived experience is that as a grown adult of mixed heritage, I experience the most of the racism that I experience today in the 21st century Britain is from the left, from that condescending tone that Dominique's just explained. I experience that all the time, and predominantly from the left. So let's acknowledge that. Yeah,
absolutely. If that's your experience, I would absolutely take that face value and wouldn't dream of questioning it. And, part of being a left-wing and a patriotic person is I try and put myself in the shoes of others, but that can be difficult to do. And at least, hopefully, we go into these issues in society knowing that it can be difficult to do, because I can know what it's like to be in the Church of England like you, but I can't know what it's like to be black. So I think, what you say, I wouldn't doubt for a moment.
Dominique, is that the problem right there? Is that the definition? I don't know what it's like to be black. We're all British, doesn't matter what our skin colour is. Surely our lived experiences shouldn't differ depending on our skin colour. Are we still focused too much on skin colour?
Yeah, I think we are too focused on skin colour, and I do think it comes from this idea about your lived experience and how your truth, your lived experience should dictate reality. And I think that's sort of where the left has been quite successful when it comes to racial politics, because they have this select group of people that have quite an extreme view of race relations, have quite an extreme view of Britain. If we're going to be specific, let's talk about Labour MP Ruba Hook, who said that Kwasi Kwarteng was superficially black because he went to Eton, or your Dawn Butlers, your Diane Abbotts, those sorts of politicians, your David Lammies. They weaponise their skin colour and use that to hammer home quite extreme left-wing political points. And the reason why it's so successful is that this sort of racialised lived experience, my truth culture that we've cultivated is very deeply entrenched in our TV, our film, our mainstream media. So they've been very successful at this, and that's why most of this sort of left-wing racism isn't actually acknowledged. You've got someone on here who actually, I think, is sort of acknowledging it, but I would say he's in the minority. If you got someone on here that was, BLM, Extinction Rebellion,
Well, we've had enough of the BLM Extinction Rebellion lots, Dominique.
You probably wouldn't have, such contention.
Thank you. As ever, you talk a lot of sense. I'm with you entirely, and we need to move past
this MPs have
discrimination.
experienced racism as well.
Thank you, Peter. That was former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, and political commentator Dominique Samuels talking a lot of sense, as she always does. You're watching Real Britain with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. Plenty more still to come. See you in a few.